Morning, guys. So this is RPE Podcast, episode 6. Today we're talking with Scott. He's a physio and strength and conditioning coach, and we're going to be talking all things foot and ankle rehab and lower leg, I guess. So, Scotty, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, your story, and why you're here?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Firstly, thanks for having me today. It's a privilege to be on here. So I'm a physio. Qualified in 2009, went through the Uni of Queensland. Then after graduating, got a job at Redcliffe Hospital where I sort of did the rotations around the wards for 2 years. After that, I did the thing that I suppose a lot of Australian physios do, and I went overseas for 2 years. Lived in the UK, worked over there for a bit, and used that as a nice base to go travelling. And then came back to Australia, and I was lucky enough at the time to get a job back at Redcliffe Hospital, mainly working in their outpatient department there. In the OPSC, the Orthopaedic Physio Screening Clinic, and in the emergency department. So I guess have been really lucky to see a broad range of conditions throughout the lifespan, really. A lot of post-operative stuff, post-fractures, lots of ACL reconstruction, shoulder reconstructions, lots of back pains, neck pains, lots of acute stuff from ED. So getting a lot of people coming in after fall and maybe an ankle sprain or fracture or various acute knee or shoulder problems. And the orthopaedic physio screening condition work has been really interesting as well. So getting a lot of chronic conditions coming in. A lot in your sort of 40 to 70-year-old age group. Knees, hips, shoulders, backs. People that are on the waiting list to see an orthopaedic surgeon. But given that the waiting list can be quite long, we get them to come to physio and go through some treatment there and see what we can do to try and make them feel better. And if they're good enough, take them off the waiting list. So it's been interesting. It's been a good chance to see a lot of different stuff. Yeah.
Nice. And then, well, that's where I met you. I did my placement there at Redcliffe, and you put me through my paces.
Yeah, good. Hopefully I did a good enough job.
Yes, hopefully.
Part of it helped anyway. You're always good, you're pretty good anyway. You're pretty up with the knowledge and stuff. Your own S&C background.
Well, then you went into what made you get into the S&C side then from there?
Especially getting a lot of ACL reconstruction patients in the sort of middle to high level rehab. I wasn't happy with my skills and my knowledge. Getting back to running and things like that towards the latter end. And I wanted to be better at it. And so I thought the best way is to, go through some training, do some PD for strength conditioning coaches. I mean, that's their bread and butter, really. Training people to be better athletes, regardless of previous injuries or what. So I did my ASCO level 1 in Brisbane. Did my prac through you, which was great. And then started working with a couple of footy teams. So with Valley's reserve grade team in Brisbane last year, and then with the Brighton Roosters, their A grade team this year. And to be honest, that was probably one of the best things that I could have ever done. One of the best PD opportunities I've ever done as a physio, because it's taught me, I think, how to some extent, and bearing in mind I'm still just a rookie S&C coach, taught me how to try and train for performance, not just rehab. Mm-hmm. So that then comes back down to physio. So training people, knowing that if they've got to play footy, I know what sort of demands they've got to go through in the gym and as a sport. So you're not just looking to get them to that return to training phase. You're looking at going, right, we need to go back to training, but we still need to do this, and this to get you back and ready to play. Mm-hmm. And so that's really, I think, helped my knowledge base and skill base. And I have a lot more respect, not that I didn't have it before, but a lot more respect now for S&C coaches and the skill that takes, not just in programming a set of exercise, a session, a season, but also the ability to manage 30 plus guys in a gym. And that might be of various different abilities and skill sets in the gym and fitness levels, and try and train them to get them all better and on the same page. So yeah, it was eye-opening, and it was really good.
Well, I think that'll come good to a little bit later when we might talk about the things like prevention strategies or risk minimization strategies and how these are applied and you know, if it's an individualized or a blanket thing, whatnot. So I think that'll, that experience that you had will really kind of mold in well later there. So yeah, today, because we're talking foot, ankle, lower limb, that type of stuff, what got your kind of interest in that?
I've always, it's a difficult area. I think a lot of physios have a bit of trouble with. I know I've had my own sort of foot and ankle problems in the past. That's probably led me there a little bit, but more recently I did a foot and ankle course through a podiatrist. The guy's name's Tim Branson, so he certainly does a lot of courses in New South Wales, he's done a couple in Queensland. You get a chance to go on it, it's great. And it just opened my eyes to, I suppose, training the foot and ankle more. And gave me a whole lot more confidence than what I previously had to do more with it, because it's a strong, robust joint with loads of muscles in it, loads of joints, and it introduced me to the barefoot side of the spectrum. And I went down the rabbit hole for a little bit into everything barefoot is good. I've started to shift back a little bit from that, a bit of time and a bit of perspective on things, but it's opened up another avenue for training for me, and one that I think is particularly important with foot and ankle rehab.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting that you can go down big rabbit holes with the, I guess, the biomechanics and that involved in the foot, just because it's such a, like, it's that first point of contact with the ground. Everything kind of that you're doing lower limb has to, if you're creating power, if you're absorbing power, everything happens through the foot there. So you want to take us through kind of just a brief kind of overview of what the foot and ankles kind of role is in kind of, I guess, live athletic performance?
Yeah, well, I guess firstly, understanding what the purpose of the foot is for. So the foot and ankle, I suppose, and that is really to mold to the ground, to enable a relatively vertical shin, to be able to transfer force through, whether we're running or whether we're standing, walking, running, cutting on a variety of different surfaces, whether it's up or downhill, there's a camber, or perhaps it's an uneven kind of a surface. So that's the first thing, is to mold the foot to the ground. It's also got to act as a shock absorber. So anytime we're moving, we hit the ground, and that's that first point where we start to absorb force through the foot. You know, you sort of, if you're walking, it's that heel strike, a bit of absorption there, but mainly as the foot, as you come through a mid stance and the foot starts to pronate as you're going through mid stance there, that's where a lot of the shock absorption happens. If you're running, depending on, you know, you can talk for hours on rear foot, mid foot, forefoot strike, but as you're sort of running faster and faster, you sort of land in the mid and forefoot there, and there's a lot of absorption that happens through there. And as we start running, particularly at high speeds, it's got to act as a spring as well to propel us in whatever direction we're going. So the other thing I've been getting into a little bit lately is muscle architecture, and just going back to uni and going a bit deeper into that and trying to work out, you know, in better detail, am I doing what's right? Could it be better? How do we train these muscles to be better at what they're designed to do? Because there's, you know, thousands of years of evolution that's got us to this point. So if you look at the muscle architecture in particularly the extrinsic muscles, there's not a lot of detail that I've found for the intrinsic muscles of the foot. Although if you have a look closely at that, you may come to some sort of conclusion of that. But the muscles of the lower leg, they're all pennant muscles. So they're all designed to produce or resist force. They've also got some really long tendons. So pretty well all of the muscle in the foot have really big, long tendons that extend down through the ankle to their attachment points in the foot. So they're really designed to absorb and store and release energy. You know, if you think about how or what they do, you know, how much do we weigh? You know, whether you're male or female, you might be sort of 45 kilos up to, you know, 100 plus kilos, fit or unfit, and it's got to do all these things. It's got to, you know, act as a shock absorber and a spring. So all of that tendon sort of maximizes its mechanical advantage to do that. it then wraps around the malleoli of the foot or underneath the retinaculum, various parts of the foot, to act as a bit more of a lever to again maximise the ability to use that tendon. So I think when it then comes to rehabbing patients, we need to consider that, and we need to train it to do the job it was designed to do. So we'll talk about it a bit later, but you know, you can only go so far just doing basic concentric and eccentric slow exercises. You have to take it further to maximise that biometric ability and that storage and release of energy in the tendons.
Well, I think one of the cool ones that when I was on placement with you, I remember you pointed me in the direction of I think it was a Ross Smith video on like the importance of soleus, and then as you dig deeper and deeper, like in so many different running movements, like soleus is taking like so much of the brunt of body weight, and it's just trying to isometrically kind of resist and create that tension in that tendon to be able to be that spring that it needs to be. Like it's pretty underappreciated, I think, the importance of little soleus, or not little, it's pretty big, but
yeah, well, it's the biggest by volume. It's the biggest muscle in the lower leg. By physiological sectional area, it's the biggest muscle in the lower leg. It's got short fibres with quite a high, low, high, more of a vertical kind of a pennation angle there. So it's really designed to absorb that force. You use that Achilles tendon as the spring that it's meant to be. And I thought that Ross Smith video series was excellent.
Yeah, I might link that in this podcast below.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that's great. So that's the basic biomechanics now. So now do we want to go into our, I guess, most common injuries that we get, and a little bit of rehab work forward with it. So say like want to start off with our lateral ankles?
I guess after a lateral ankle injury, first thing that you want to make sure of is that there's no fracture.
Yeah.
Is the key. So probably the best way to work out whether it needs an X-ray or not is to consider the Ottawa ankle rules, which is a really good set of rules, decision-making criteria to work out whether an X-ray is needed or not. And more or less what it is any of the following. So tenderness over the posterior edge of the tip of the lateral or medial malleolus, on the bottom 6 centimetres. Tenderness over the navicular bone, tenderness over the base of the fifth metatarsal, or inability to weight and bear immediately or in the emergency department. Or I suppose as physios in a clinical setting, in the clinic.
Yep.
So if any of that is the case, it probably should get an X-ray to rule out the fracture. So the Ottawa ankle rules, excellent sensitivity, so excellent ruling out that there's a fracture, but moderate sort of specificity. So it won't tell you there is a fracture, but it will tell you when there's a high chance there isn't a fracture. So if you've been through that, no fracture, I guess you're then looking at where the sprain is. So which ligament is it? Because they might have implications later on down the line. And what sort of rehab you do, comparing a syndesmosis sprain or a high ankle sprain versus an ATFL or a CFL sprain or a bicuspid ligament sprain, I guess. From there, I guess initially it's your basic first aid management, whatever acronym you use, whether it's RICE or PRICE or police or peace and love or rescue or whatever it is. So I like the acronym police. So protect, optimal loading, ice compression, elevation. So from what I understand, an ankle's best assessed about 4 or 5 days down the line after the injury.
Yeah, that was interesting.
You don't really want to be going and doing an anterior draw on an acutely injured ACL sprain. You shouldn't really be pushing that hard, but you don't really want to do more damage than what you've already done. And then, going through basic management. So ice compression, elevation, whether that's compression with tube grip or initial injuries, whether it's actual digital pressure over the side of the injury to help for a little while, whatever you think is relevant at the time, I suppose. And then it's that protection. So depending on how serious the injury is, maybe it's putting in a moon boot for a little while. Immobilise that ankle joint, still allows them to walk, reduce pressures through the foot and the leg, still maintaining a good gait pattern, but you're just not stressing that ligament as much. It could be non-wavering for a period of time if it's really, really sore, in which case you could still put them in a moon boot or some kind of a brace to limit how much movement is happening with that ankle joint for the first maybe 4 to 7 days.
Yeah, did you see that? That was the interesting thing. I think it was that the best outcomes for this is talking the clinical practice guidelines, the best outcomes for kind of return to sport, if we're looking, was to like not immobilize with, say, anything that was actually a fixed rigid thing, but rather kind of taping. But then the best outcomes for pain were with things like moon boots, etc. But for everything, it was like you want it off within kind of that 10 days where possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it depends how severe the sprain is too. You know, if I had a grade at 1 ankle sprain, I wouldn't put them in a boot. But if it was a grade sort of what you call a high grade 2 or a 3 ankle sprain, they might just need that extra bit of protection. And if it allows them to walk still, they're still loading through that limb, they're still loading the other muscles, and then you get it out for therapy, which you might do a couple of times a day. Just work through basic, relatively pain-free or minimal pain range of motion, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, maybe eversion, probably not too much inversion in the first week to 10 days, but just going through range of motion and some really basic resisted exercises, not for the point of strengthening anything, but just trying to minimize strength loss as much as possible, I guess.
Yep.
Because as much as the ligament might be injured, you could also have injuries to the perineal muscles. You could have also injuries to the superficial perineal nerve that runs down there as well. You can certainly stretch that too. So just trying to take into consideration what other injuries the person might have as well as that ligament.
Yeah, so your differential around there, like you are having to look at the structures that are also protecting those ligaments and also structures that kind of run past those ligaments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
No, that makes sense.
And then from there, it's just as pain allows, challenging it more. You know, getting that boot off, more and more weight bearing. You might start with some walking, working out where that point is for when that pain starts to get worse with walking. So it could be up and down the hallway, it could be a couple of houses up and down the street, until they find out they can walk for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then, working within that, starting to challenge the foot with some basic TheraBand exercises. A lot of people like proprioception exercise with wobble boards and things like that. I don't tend to use that, and that's a personal preference. I think that's partly working the public system. I see some people that don't turn up to appointments if it's the wrong week because it's not pay week. They can't afford the petrol to come in, so then ask them to go out and spend money on a wobble board, which they might only use for 3 weeks. I can't justify that. So other ways you can certainly work on proprioception. So proprioception for the ankle, in my opinion at least, isn't just can you draw numbers or letters or stand on an unstable surface. Proprioception is knowledge of where the joint is in space. So if you're using TheraBand, I think you can definitely do proprioception exercise with that. And this is where it comes down to considering, contraction types, so concentric, eccentric, isometric contraction. I like to get patients to, especially early, 3 seconds out, hold for a second, and 3 seconds back in to where they started from. So, you're working on getting that time aspect and joint angle speed as you're working through there. And to me, that's proprioception as much as seeing on a foam object or a wobble board, and that's starting that early. And I think that's better than writing the alphabet with your foot, which some people like to prescribe, because it's connecting the brain to control the foot rather than just going at any speed. You're controlling it. And then you can progress from there through the TheraBand once it starts to get smoother and smoother and smoother. So from there, once they're walking more and they can start and jump or hop, going through those basic one-off sort of movements. And if they can do 10 hops in a row, then I like to get them running. So starting slow speed, whatever's comfortable for them, short distances, short reps to start with. And then as they start to tolerate that more longer distances, and maybe still small number of repetitions, and build that up in straight line. So I'd probably go to a maximum of probably 30 or 40 metre shuttles, depending on what they can tolerate, and repeat that. Once they can probably do, I don't know, 4 or 5 sets of 40 metres, 4 or 5 reps of 40 metres, probably 3 or 4 sets, I'm happy to start and not change the directions work so much, but start sort of wide angle runs. So curving out to the left, curving out to the right. So coming on a firm surface.
Those things that are more challenging the actual structures, because you're actually the foot's going to have to mold to the ground and be slight. Yeah, spot on. So the foot still stays level on the ground, but the shank of the tibia changes as you're running. So relatively going into inversion, eversion, and you're changing that with different directions. As they get better, speeding that up. So there's still fairly wide turns, but at a faster speed. So it's a lot harder to control. And then moving into sort of cutting motions. And I like to call them zigzags. So you sort of skip one way, hop, skip the other way, hop, skip one way, skip the other way, hop, and doing that. Do you use any, say, so you have those criteria, but do you go as strict as, say, with ACLs or whatever, where you're wanting them to have a certain, I guess, strength relative to the other in, say, their plantarflexors or in their kind of dorsiflexors, everters, or are you wanting them to have a certain, like, power in their hops or anything first? Like, we're more kind of going on that running continuum?
I think getting to running, I like them to be able to do 3 lots of 20 calf raises on one leg.
Yep.
I like them to be able to generate a similar amount of force into eversion. We don't have a dynamometer that gives exact value, so it's kind of just how does that feel in the clinic, and that's probably about it. I think once you can get a reasonable amount of inversion, eversion sort of power, once you've got a reasonable amount, once you can do 3 lots of 20 calf raises, you could bang away with that to get 30, 40, 50, the same as the other side. And I probably would include that if, the other leg could do 30. But to get that high level amount of power and endurance, you really need to get running. Yep. So you could try and do 30 calf raises, but if you run for a minute, chances are you've done more than 30 repetitions on that leg.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's I hate to use the word, but it's more functional. It's more in line with the goal of therapy, the goal of the return to the activity. Sorry.
Yep.
And the other thing I like is lateral movements. So side skips, grapevines, partner work I find is really good. A really nice drill is if you've got a partner, 4 cones laying in the middle, about 1.5 meters apart, and it's just a mirroring drill. So one person will be the leader, one person will be the follower, and just going sideways to touch the cones, 30 seconds each. So it's a nice way to get some lateral movement, not thinking about the ankle, reacting to a kind of stimulus, and then working into a level of fatigue as well.
So regarding, say, pain with any of this, because this is a interest, so what kind of levels or what's kind of acceptable for you? I know probably the answer is going to be it's individual and it depends on the person, the person's tolerance to pain, the person, if there's someone who's going to push themselves to danger, or if there's someone who's so afraid of pain that they'll never push themselves to get there. But I don't know, with an ankle, are you a little bit more lenient with pain as long as you've ruled out all of your red flag things and you're assessing along the way? Nothing is kind of going south in the way of any new different pathologies or whatnot happening. Are you a little bit more lenient with pain there?
Yeah, I suppose there's 2 aspects of that. One is at the time, how does it feel? If it's kind of 3 or 4 out of 10 and it's not getting worse, fine, go for it, go for your life. On one condition, and that's how does it pull up the next day.
Yep.
If it's sorer the next day, if there's more swelling the next day, then I would say it's too much. So first aspect at the time is the strength of contraction, the amount of force on that ankle joint more than it can handle, versus what's the volume like? Is the volume more than that joint can handle at this point in time? And that's where you'll see that the next day it's more swelling, more soreness, more stiffness, sore.
And so you're finding that, I guess, you're introducing things at like a lower volume load and then increasing the volume load as you go. So it's just you find whatever intensity they're willing in that kind of 4 or so out of 10, and then it's try to find, no one knows right the very first day, but find a volume load, see how it adapted or responded to that, and then that's kind of the start point.
Yep, more or less. I like to, in the clinic, give with the home exercise program targets. I want you to build up to, 3 sets of 3 reps of whatever, but start here. I'd much rather they start lighter and don't overdo it and flare it up for a couple of days, because that means I'll get an extra couple of days of training. It might start lower, but you can make sure that it then doesn't flare up the next day, and then you just build on that as they can kind of tolerate it within their pain limits and their abilities, until they hit that target or do better.
Cool. And the other one question I just have going off in the back of my mind is regarding then what we're kind of going to talk about later, other pathologies that can, and especially a lateral ankle sprain can be the start of a lot of these other pathologies that we'll talk about later if it's rehabbed poorly. So the getting back your dorsiflexion range of motion, have a certain kind of amount that you're going, okay, that's good enough to run now, so that you're not going to be putting extra stress on, say, the plantar fascia, putting extra stress on the knee joint or on the hip joint, like that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So I like to look at 15 to 20 degrees of talocrural range of motion. I know a lot of people use knee to wall to look at that, and for a certain degree. Personally, I don't like that because you can compensate a little bit there. Dorsiflexion generally more or less occurs at the talocrural joint, so I like to look and make sure to get that. And normal is 15 to 20. Depends on how mobile people's tissue are a little bit as to how far they get, but generally running, 15 to 20 degrees. So if that means joint mobs, talocrural joint, if that means soft tissue work to the back of the calf there, I'll do that as well. Also looking at the subtalar joint, making sure that that's got a reasonable amount of joint play there. Inferior fib joint, sometimes that gets a bit stiff after an ankle injury as well. And also the first MTP joint as well. Sometimes they're a bit stiff anyway. So coming over into toe off, making sure that they can get there and not load up any other structures along the way, like their plantar fascia or their Achilles tendon.
And the last one that I just kind of thought of there as well is, along with, I guess, your lateral ankle sprains, quite often during your rehab, someone might come across like either an anterior or kind of a posterior impingement as well there. So is that to you a major kind of thing where you're having to kind of, again, go back, kind of take a step back through, or is that something that you're kind of able to deal with during the rehab process, that you are worried about, not worried about? Kind of what's your thought?
Depends how sore it is and depends when it comes on. Often getting in and doing some talocrural mobs, just put some talar mobs, inferior fib joint mobs, really good at sorting it out, I think. Most times, in my experience anyway, and making sure they've got enough calf length. Sometimes I think if they don't have enough calf length, they pivot at the front of that talocrural joint, and that's where a lot of impingement occurs. And if you can sort out the talus and the soft tissue work muscles at the back, I find that works quite nicely for me anyway.
Yeah, so just looking at kind of getting compliance in that whole
Yeah,
structure there, not being too worried if they are getting some of that little pinching, but it's more the context in which it's coming on, I guess.
yeah, exactly. You know, and the muscles especially can be pretty ropey in the back of the calf there. You know, we flog it. You know, I'm 80 kilos and running, and you know, I'm only fairly light really, but like, they've got to work pretty bloody hard. And they're not in good nick, and you then have an injury. Sometimes you need to spend a bit of time undoing the beatings that the body's, you know, put itself through before you can move forward.
You got any questions there, Connor, on any of that type of stuff so far?
Pretty good. No, I think I'll have a few coming up though when we get a little bit further down the track.
Cool. All right. Well, do we want to have a little quick cover of medial and maybe like syndesmosis things, just like a quick little breakdown of those, which are a lot less common. Like I can share up. I know we had like 34 ankle lost time injuries last year for us at Norths, and of which I think 26 or something were lateral ankles, which is pretty kind of common. Like most percent will be that, but the other ones are you'll get your medial, your deltoid ligament sprains, and your kind of, I guess, your higher ankle sprains. So do you just want to talk us through a little bit of those, Scotty?
Yeah, I mean, medial ankle sprains I find are tricky, and they take longer because the foot naturally has to pronate a little bit as you walk, and that then can put a bit of extra stress on those ligaments. So I would tape them or brace them, or potentially even put a prefabricated orthotic in the foot, in the shoe of someone like that, because they tend to be quite tricky. And if someone tends to overpronate a little bit anyway, it makes it really hard. And they're big, strong, thick set of ligaments that resist it there. So yeah, look, I find them really tricky. I find them tricky. The principles of rehab, I think, are similar. You're trying to build up that plantar flexion score. Firstly, build up, protect it firstly, do your police sort of stuff, optimally load it, put in the boot if it needs to. But rehab, as they start to tolerate more plantar flexion, I guess, strength-based exercises, really work on that. Really work on inversion strength as well. Yeah, and progressing along that, because I think when the bulk of what the foot and the ankle does is plantar flexion. Looking at it, you've got, you know, your big plantar flexors like your soleus and your gastrocs, then you've got your deep plantar flexors like your flexor digitorum, flexor longus, tib post to some extent does plantar flexion and maintains a bit of foot posture, I suppose. And they're the biggest muscles in the foot, really. They do the bulk of it all. So really working on that plantar flexion strength and the stiffness of the ankle, and that's where I think is particularly important for medial ankle sprains. Because if it's not stiff, you're going to pronate through there. You're going to have a bit of slop through there, and it's going to be hard to rehab. It's going to take longer.
Good. Any questions there, Connor, on that?
How would you measure stiffness, or what would you look for to make sure there is enough stiffness through the joint there?
Yeah, really good question. And it's more dynamic stiffness as opposed to joint stiffness. So looking at it, videoing it, I find is good. Once they get to the point where they can do some high level tasks, which is where it becomes more important. So if they start to run on it, or sort of hop on it, or sort of do what I sort of call bunny hops, where you sort of you're bouncing your heels up and down off the ground while keeping your toes on the ground, looking to see if, as you come down, does it sort of pronate in, continually do that. So videoing it, being able to, I mean, phones these days are amazing. You can get sort of slow motion apps. You can really slow it down and have a bit of a look at it. And I guess it's just really having a look at quality. I've got nothing there that gives quantitative sort of objective measure. It's just looking at it, videoing it, and you might be able to see down the line. Particularly important when you get to running, the single leg stuff.
You haven't used the old, what is it, the ankle, what's the foot index or whatever it is?
dynamic foot.
No, I haven't.
Dynamic foot, no, I haven't used that since learning about it. But I mean, you
could if you could quantify it. You know,
Yeah.
if it does what you want it to do, maybe. I just don't know enough about it. I haven't used it.
Yeah.
A bit of contention with that anyway, because I don't know if we'll talk about risk factors for ankle sprains and things like that, but it'll come up somewhere. But a common risk factor you see for a lot of lower limb injuries is overpronation. So like, I don't think we have a good definition of what overpronation is, and who's defining it will completely change. And yeah, I don't know whether those tools are actually any good at saying if it's overpronation or if it's just that person's normal amount of pronation. So,
and, I mean, I haven't looked at the studies on it, but I'm assuming they're based on Caucasian feet. Caucasian feet are different to Fijian feet.
Yes, very different.
So, I mean, how do you use that on different populations? Is the other question that you've got to ask. You know, just because somebody's got flat feet doesn't make it a problem. Look how good some of the Fijians are at rugby sevens and stuff like that. I'm sure, I haven't seen their feet, but I'm sure they're pretty flat. You know, it's structure, and if it's strong in that structure, great.
Isn't that interesting? Because the whole idea, I guess, of the we'll talk later, the plantar fascia, but like your windlass mechanism, you want that nice arch. So then as your great toe goes into extension, it creates that big spring to drive forward.
Yeah.
Some of our best guys, our Papua New Guineans, Fijians, feet are just like completely, almost like,
they're plain, don't they?
Yeah, almost. They can still run. Like, it's just, if your body, if that's what it's been like forever, you've adapted to that. You're pretty strong in that position. You're going to be fine, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I think you're exactly right. And it's the structure of the foot. If you're born with an arch that's called a medium arch, it's not high or low. If you're strong within that, great. If you're strong with a relatively flat foot, also great. And you look at those sort of Fijian or Tongan or sort of island feet, and they're huge. There's so much muscle in them. They're enormous. They're not bony at all. So I guess, like I say, they've adapted to that. They've got that muscle support structure in place that it's there to absorb the force that's been put through. And you know, they're 110, 120 kilo blokes. So like, they do a good job.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, this might actually be a really good place to leave this. And Scotty, would you be happy to pick up chatting in another one where we've kind of talked about ankle sprains, and then we can go a bit into the other pathologies?